I mean, I feel like they're all political. I feel like it's the individual versus the big corporation or the big group.
It's about good and evil in us, as well as our institutions. So, and the idea that some of us think we're really great people, but in the real world we're not. We're terrible people who run your life in a very selfish way, and you think you're doing good when you're actually not. All Star Wars is a way of updating that idea to say, watch out, because there are people out there who don't play by the rules. And if you're not careful, you're going to lose all your freedom. And at the same time, those people who may not play by the rules because they're selfish and greedy turn themselves into evil people who don't care about other people.
Did Daisy Ridley just say Star Wars is all about politics? Her recent comments have sparked a heated debate among fans. For decades, Star Wars has been known for its epic storytelling, heroes and villains, grand adventures, and the timeless battle between good and evil. But now, Ridley is making headlines by claiming that politics lie at the core of the franchise. Many longtime fans are fired up, and one can't help but wonder what George Lucas would think. After all, Lucas has often described Star Wars as mythic storytelling, a saga rooted in universal themes, not a vehicle for modern political agendas. So, is Ridley rewriting Star Wars history? Or is there actually some truth to her statement? And more importantly, what could this mean for the future of the galaxy far, far away?
Doing a film that could affect kids. And I'd studied mythology and everything, and I decided I'm going to make a modern myth, and which teaches, again, the basics of what you have in a society, because mythology is there to glue a society together. It gives you common ideas about who you are, about what your society is, what you believe in, what your God is, what your values are, and it's based on the psychological motifs behind myths. I disliked the business of Hollywood intensely. When I had that choice of Star Wars being a success, I said, I'm going to try to make a go for it. And so I invested in the next movie and borrowed money from a bank and everything. I had everything at stake. I did it primarily because I didn't want the studios to tell me what to do. I didn't want them coming and commenting on my work and putting their little ideas in there. And because I needed to make sure I controlled the vision and not have it be diluted by a lot of other people, I ended up with a company, and the company was successful, and movies were...
Daisy Ridley's recent comments about Star Wars being inherently political have sent shockwaves through the fandom. But the real question on everyone's mind is, what would George Lucas think? Ridley claims that Star Wars has always been about the individual versus the big corporation or ruling power, and that political themes have been part of the story from the very beginning. To her, the battle between good and evil is not just fantasy, but something deeply connected to real life, a universal struggle that's woven into the DNA of the saga. Some fans agree with her. After all, the conflict between the Rebel Alliance and the Galactic Empire is a clear allegory for resisting oppression. And the prequels famously explored how a democracy can crumble into dictatorship, a storyline packed with political undertones. But others aren't buying it. Critics argue that Ridley's comments are just another attempt to inject modern political agendas into Star Wars, rather than focusing on what made the franchise iconic in the first place: timeless storytelling, unforgettable characters, and epic adventures. And if anyone knows what Star Wars is really about, it's George Lucas. The creator of the galaxy far, far away has always said the franchise is rooted in mythology, heroism, and the classic struggle between light and dark. Yes, politics are present, but they were always subtle, inspired by history, and used to enhance the story, not overshadow it. Lucas didn't turn Star Wars into a lecture. He built a fantasy world where deeper themes existed in the background, enriching the narrative without pulling fans out of the adventure. So, is Ridley offering a valid perspective, or rewriting the legacy? That's the debate that's dividing the fandom.
Ridley finally revealed how she feels about the sequel trilogy.
Were you surprised by how divisive it was, the reception to it?
I think it's still upsetting because you don't want people to feel like you've not served the thing that they're a fan of. Ryan's one was so divisive.
You think?
So, yeah, so it really felt like the first one was fairly, everyone was responsive in a similar way.
This works, thank God.
Yeah.
How did it happen?
And then Ryan's one, super divisive, and then the last one, super divisive.
By framing Star Wars as a story of individual activism against large corporations, she shifts the narrative into the realm of modern political talking points, a far cry from the mythic, universal themes that George Lucas originally envisioned. Her interpretation feels more like a retrofit than a reflection of what the saga has truly been about. Many fans are now questioning whether Ridley fully understands Lucas's intent. Yes, the prequels drew criticism for their political themes, but Lucas approached those topics with subtlety and narrative depth. When he incorporated real-world politics, he did so through allegory, not direct messaging. Take, for example, the character Newt Gunray, a name inspired by Newt Gingrich or Anakin Skywalker's chilling line, "If you're not with me, then you're my enemy," which echoed a post-9/11 speech by President George W. Bush. These weren't on-the-nose statements meant to dominate the story. They were carefully layered into the background, allowing viewers to uncover deeper meaning without being yanked out of the fantasy. Lucas didn't preach. He painted. He used the galaxy far, far away to explore how power corrupts, how democracies fall, and how heroes rise, not to push any present-day ideology, but to reflect timeless truths.
I like to make men uncomfortable. I enjoy making men uncomfortable. Not you, just not you. Not you.
Point taken. Point taken.
I am working to bring something that makes you uncomfortable, and it should make you uncomfortable because you need to change your attitude. And it's only when you're uncomfortable, when you're shifty, when you have to have difficult conversations that you will perhaps look at yourself in the mirror and not like the reflection.
I agree. We'll start working on that. I am a Californian. Be nice. Just being but honest, but you know what? But Elon, that is it is. With a few folks to go first.
The real concern now surrounding Star Wars, New Jedi Order, is how the film will handle politics. Some early statements suggest the movie might push a non-political message, rather than embracing the timeless, layered storytelling approach George Lucas was known for. Fans are already expressing skepticism, particularly because the film's director, Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy, is widely recognized for her political activism. She has openly stated that all her projects include elements of activism, which has raised fears that the movie could prioritize messaging over crafting a compelling Star Wars narrative. Adding to the uncertainty, the film has cycled through multiple writers, with Stephen Knight and Damon Lindelof previously involved. The script is now being handled by George Nolfi, who has acknowledged that Star Wars has always featured broad political themes, citing the Empire's parallels with Nazi Germany and the Roman Empire. However, Nolfi insists that New Jedi Order will not focus on contemporary political issues. Still, given Lucasfilm's recent track record under Disney, many fans remain doubtful about whether the story will stay true to the spirit of the saga or become a vehicle for modern-day commentary.
Star Wars movie is tentatively titled New Jedi Order. Are you excited to explore Rey as a teacher after 3 films of her as the learner?
I am. It's very strange. I've gone off and done lots of different sorts of films. I feel like I've learnt a lot and grown a lot, I would hope, as an actor. I think it will feel like baby steps again. Like, I think it will feel like sort of starting at the beginning, because I'm like, but yes, I'm very excited.
Do you think she'll be a different teacher, or she'll do it a little differently from Luke?
I would say, from what I understand, yes.
The frustration in the fandom is completely understandable. Under Disney, Star Wars has often been criticized for prioritizing identity politics and divisive narratives over strong, cohesive storytelling. Many fans still feel burned by The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker, which left the sequel trilogy feeling disjointed and unsatisfying for a large portion of the audience. Now, the decision to center yet another film around Rey, despite widespread calls for the franchise to explore new characters and eras, feels to many like yet another tone-deaf move. But at the core of this controversy lies something deeper. Star Wars used to be something that brought people together. It was a mythic, unifying story that spanned generations, filled with adventure, heroism, and hope. Today, though, It often feels like each new installment is just another battleground in the ongoing culture wars. Rather than delivering the next great space fantasy, Disney seems more focused on using the Star Wars brand as a vehicle for pushing modern political and social agendas. And that runs directly counter to what George Lucas envisioned. His goal was never to make Star Wars a platform for division, but rather to create a universal story that could resonate with people regardless of their background or beliefs. Lucas crafted a mythos that was meant to inspire, to entertain, and to offer an escape from the complexities of the real world. He understood that truly powerful storytelling comes from depth, not division, from timeless themes, not trendy talking points. Fans aren't just asking for nostalgia, they're asking for Star Wars to get back to its heart.
Lost control of Star Wars, so it's going off in a different path than what I intended. But the first 6 are very much mine and my philosophy.
Let me just talk about the upcoming Star Wars, The Force Awakens. How do you feel about it?
Well, it's, I made the decision to sell the company with Star Wars. I made that decision. It started here and it went there, and it's all about generations, and it's about, the issues of fathers and sons and grandfathers, and it's a family soap opera. I mean, ultimately, space, we call it space opera, but people don't realize it's actually a soap opera, and it's all about family problems and that. It's not about spaceships. So they decided they didn't want to use those stories. They decided they were going to go do their own thing, and so I decided, fine, but basically, I'm not going to try to. They weren't that keen to have me involved anyway, but at the same time, I said, I'm not going to. If I get in there, I'm just going to cause trouble, because they're not going to do what I want them to do. So, and I don't have the control to do that anymore, and all it would do is muck everything up. And everything in your body says, don't, you can't. And these are my kids. So
all those Star Wars films.
All the Star Wars films.
They were your kids.
Yeah, well, they are my. I loved them. I created them. I'm very intimately involved in them, and obviously to sell them off. I sold them to the white slavers that take these things and.
When George Lucas reportedly heard Daisy Ridley's recent comments, rumors say he was shocked, maybe even angry, left scratching his head in disbelief. He couldn't understand how someone so closely tied to Star Wars could so thoroughly misunderstand its core message. To Lucas, Star Wars was never about modern-day activism or corporate virtue signaling. It was about myth-making, storytelling, and timeless themes that rise above the politics of the moment. Lucas has always been clear about what Star Wars is meant to represent. Yes, the saga contains political undertones, but not in the way Ridley described. From the very beginning, Lucas framed Star Wars as the classic struggle of the underdog against an oppressive system, rebels versus empire, republic versus dictatorship. It wasn't about individuals fighting corporations, as Ridley suggested. It was about the fight for freedom, the resistance to tyranny, and the dangers of unchecked power. Lucas famously drew from real-world history when crafting the original trilogy, particularly the Vietnam War. He envisioned the rebellion as a stand-in for the Viet Cong, fighting a technologically superior force, echoing his disillusionment with empire building, whether it was the British Empire or, in his own words, the American Empire. His goal was to show how even democratic systems can crumble into authoritarianism when power is abused. That's why the original trilogy focused on the fall of the Empire, and the prequels explored the decay of the Republic. But Lucas also understood something modern Star Wars often forgets: how a story is told matters. He didn't bludgeon audiences with on-the-nose messaging or overt political commentary. Instead, he wove allegory and deeper meaning into the fabric of the galaxy through world-building and narrative structure. The result was a story that felt universal and timeless, not tied to any single era's political discourse. That's the magic fans connected with, and why so many are disheartened by the direction the franchise seems to be taking now.
They didn't want to use those stories. They decided they were going to go do their own thing, and so I decided, fine, but basically I'm not going to try to. They weren't that keen to have me involved anyway, but at the same time I said, I'm not going to. If I get in there, I'm just going to cause trouble, because they're not going to do what I want them to do. So, and I don't have the control to do that anymore, and all it would do is muck everything up. So I said, okay, I will go my way and I'll let them go their way. But I knew there's 3 more stories. And I knew that was going to probably take, to do it right would take about 10 years. And I said, I'm 70. I don't know whether I'll be here when I'm 80. Every 10 years, the odds get less. And so I said, and I'm not ready to do that because I want to do these other things. So I have to make the decision on my own that it's time for me to...
Lucas definitely included subtle political nods in his work. There's no denying that. Naming Newt Gunray after Newt Gingrich and including a character like Lot Dodd as a wink at Senator Trent Lott were clear examples. But those were inside jokes, not the foundation of the narrative. They never overpowered the story. Even when Lucas inserted sharper references, like Anakin's infamous line, "If you're not with me, then you're my enemy," which echoed George W. Bush's post 9/11 rhetoric, it was still woven seamlessly into the arc of Anakin's descent into darkness. It served the character, the story, and the broader themes of Star Wars without turning the saga into a political soapbox. That's why Daisy Ridley's recent comments hit a nerve with fans. When she claimed Star Wars as fundamentally political and framed it as a story of individuals versus corporations, it didn't just feel tone-deaf. It felt like a complete misreading of what Star Wars is at its core. She wasn't simply acknowledging that politics exist in the galaxy far, far away. She was redefining the franchise through the lens of modern ideological struggles. And that's where the disconnect lies. The issue isn't recognizing that Star Wars has political layers. Of course it does, Lucas built it that way. The problem is shifting the focus to today's political struggles and reframing the saga to match contemporary activist narratives. That approach risks turning Star Wars from a mythic, timeless adventure into something preachy and fleeting, a lecture instead of an escape, a statement instead of a story. And that's exactly what fans fear. Not because they want Star Wars to be apolitical, but because they want it to be universal. They want it to inspire, not divide. And when key figures in the franchise seem to fundamentally misunderstand that, it's no surprise that George Lucas might be shaking his head along with the rest of the fandom. And here's the heart of it. With New Jedi Order, the concerns aren't just about one actor's comment. They reflect a broader unease with the direction Star Wars has taken under Disney's leadership. Director Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy has openly stated that activism is central to her work. While passion and purpose can be strengths in filmmaking, her track record raises real questions about whether the upcoming Star Wars installment will reflect George Lucas's nuanced storytelling, or if it will lean into overt, heavy-handed messaging that could alienate the very audience it hopes to inspire. Screenwriter George Nolfi has attempted to reassure fans, saying the movie won't dwell on modern-day politics. But after years of seeing Star Wars shift from universal myth to modern battleground, many fans remain deeply skeptical. The issue isn't that Star Wars has themes, it's that the balance is gone. Under Lucas, the saga touched on political ideas, yes, but it did so with subtlety and allegory, not blunt force. The Empire wasn't a one-to-one metaphor, it was a timeless warning about power, control, and resistance. Today, fans worry that the Force is being overshadowed by the franchise's desire to make statements instead of stories. They don't want to be preached to. They want to be moved. They want a story that brings people together the way Star Wars once did, through myth, adventure, and the eternal struggle between light and dark. Lucas created a galaxy that transcended time and politics. He gave us a space where anyone, regardless of who they are, could see themselves as a hero, a rebel, a dreamer. That's what's at stake with New Jedi Order. Not just the future of Rey's story, but the soul of the franchise itself.
He said it is the moment in which the entire industry changed. Star Wars is the moment when the industry changed.
Well, it changed for the good and for the bad.
Yeah.
And, it's again, when you invent things, well, you don't invent things, I don't know. But when you bring new things into a society, you can either, it's like the balance of the Force. Yeah. You can either use it for good or you can use it for evil. And what happens when there's something new,
people have a tendency to overdo it. They abuse it. Now, there were two things that got abused with Star Wars, and it's still being abused. One, when Star Wars came out, everybody said, oh, it's a silly movie, it's just a bunch of space battles and stuff. It's not real. There's nothing behind it. And I said, well, there is stuff behind it. It's not just a space battle. There's more to it than that. It's much, much more complicated than that. But nobody would listen. So they just said, oh, well, it's simple. We like the spaceships. We like the stuff. So they said, fine. So the spaceships and that part of the science fantasy, whatever, got terribly abused. And of course, everybody went out and made spaceship movies. And they were all horrible, and they all lost tons of money. And you say, well, you know, there's more to it than that. You can't just go out and do spaceships. And the other part which is the technology, which is, oh, we'll just take this new technology. It's great. You know, especially when it came down later to digital technology, where you can really do anything. And then people just abused it all over the place, which they did with color, they did with sound. Whenever there's a new tool, everybody goes crazy, and they forget the fact that there's actually a story, and that's the point. You're telling a story using tools. You're not using tools to tell a story. You understand that?
I do.
The point was, the other thing that got abused, naturally in a capitalist society, especially in an American point of view, which is the studios and everything said, well, wow, we can make a lot of money. This is a license to kill. And they did it. They just simply, and of course, the only way you can really do that is not take chances. Only do something that's proven. Let's not do any. We've got to remember, Star Wars came from nowhere. American Graffiti came from nowhere. There was nothing like it. Now, if you do anything that's not a sequel, or not a TV series, or it doesn't look like one, they won't do it. They say, we want something that we know.
So that's the downside of Star Wars.
That's the downside of Star Wars. And it really shows an enormous lack of imagination and fear of creativity on the part of an industry.
If George Lucas were to speak out publicly, he'd likely remind everyone why he created Star Wars in the first place. It wasn't about pushing political agendas. It was about adventure, myth, heroism, and the universal struggle between good and evil. He set out to build a timeless saga that could resonate with people across generations, regardless of their background or beliefs. To see that legacy misunderstood or twisted into something overtly ideological would almost certainly be a disappointment to him. The truth is, Star Wars doesn't need modern politics injected into it to be meaningful. It already carries powerful, enduring messages about freedom, hope, resistance against oppression, and the dangers of unchecked power. Those themes are baked into the DNA of the franchise. But when those ideas are forced through the lens of contemporary political activism, especially in ways that feel disconnected from the universe or tone of the saga, the story begins to lose its magic. It starts to feel less like Star Wars and more like a corporate lecture dressed up in sci-fi robes. Fans are already on edge, and New Jedi Order is at a critical point. The fact that the film is being directed by Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy, a filmmaker who has stated that activism is a core part of all her projects, has only intensified those concerns. While passion and perspective can absolutely enrich a story, the worry is that New Jedi Order won't follow Lucas's subtle, allegorical approach to politics, but instead push a modern, surface-level agenda that risks breaking the illusion of the galaxy far, far away. At its best, Star Wars brings people together. But if Lucasfilm continues down this path, prioritizing message over myth, the divide between the franchise and its fanbase will only deepen. For many, New Jedi Order feels like a make-or-break moment. If Lucas's original vision continues to be sidelined, this could very well be the final nail in the coffin for those who once saw Star Wars as something greater than just another platform for today's cultural battles.
This finally breaks his silence on Disney's Star Wars. He says a lot of the ideas got lost. You know what? Let's just go to the clip.
The Force. Nobody understood the Force. Nobody, what they do is, and then they started other ones when I sold the company, and they, a lot of those ideas that were in there sort of got lost. But that's the way it is.
That is just like so hard to listen to. Do you hear in his voice how sad he is? That like they're changing and ruining his baby, like what he created now. At the same time, it's like a little hard to feel bad for him because he sold it for like $4.5 billion, right? Like he sold it for billions of dollars. It was his choice to sell it. Like once, you know, he sold it to them, he has no say anymore, right? But like at the same time, I imagined like Iger and Kathleen Kennedy were being like, don't worry, we're going to take care of it for you. It's in good hands, yada, yada, yada. Hell, like Iger even said that to him in like his memoir and all that stuff. So like, you know, he probably feels a little shysted over here being like, dude, you guys said you were going to handle it like, you know, with care and you're not handling it with care. Anyway, let's read his full quote because that clip didn't capture everything. So what he fully said was this: I was the one who really knew what Star Wars was, who actually knew this world because there's a lot to it. Yes, of course, because he's the creator of Star Wars. Anyway, he goes on to say, the Force, for example, nobody understood the Force, he said. When they started other ones after I sold the company, a lot of the ideas that were in the original sort of got lost. But that's the way it is. You give up, you give up. Again, that's heartbreaking because you can tell like he is really upset that they are butchering his baby, his creation. Like this is the guy, the sole man responsible for Star Wars. It's so
Lucas understood something fundamental. Politics in Star Wars should serve the story, not overshadow it. The politics were always there, yes, but they were layered into the mythos, not stamped on the surface. They gave the galaxy depth, texture, and relevance, but they never distracted from the core, a timeless adventure about good versus evil, hope versus despair, freedom versus tyranny. Under Disney, though, many fans feel that balance has been lost. Instead of myth and meaning, they see messaging. Instead of characters and story, they see checklists and agendas. With Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy, an openly activist filmmaker, directing New Jedi Order, those concerns have only grown louder. There's a growing fear that this won't be the Star Wars of old, but another divisive project that puts ideology ahead of imagination. Screenwriter George Nolfi has tried to calm the storm. He's promised that the movie will stick to classic Star Wars themes and won't focus on modern-day politics. He says the story will stay true to the universe. But fans have heard that before. Too many times. And too often, they've been let down. Given a film that feels more like a TED Talk in space than a journey through a mythic galaxy. At the heart of this debate is a simple but crucial question. Will this movie honor George Lucas's legacy? Or will it continue the trend of politicizing Star Wars in a way that divides the fan base? Daisy Ridley's recent comments, framing the story as individuals versus corporations, have only added fuel to the fire. It's not just what she said, but how she said it. Redefining Star Wars through a modern lens that many believe fundamentally misses the point. Fans aren't asking for Star Wars to be apolitical, they're asking for it to be timeless. They want rich characters, compelling storytelling, and a sense of wonder that takes them to a galaxy far, far away, not a film that drags them back into today's political discourse. So now it's up to you. Do you think George Lucas would approve of this direction? Or is this just another example of Hollywood misunderstanding what made Star Wars great in the first place? Will New Jedi Order bring the fan base back together? Or will it push them even further apart? That's the question weighing heavily on the minds of Star Wars fans everywhere. With so much riding on this film, and with the franchise already facing years of division and controversy, the stakes couldn't be higher. Can this movie rekindle the magic, or will it be remembered as just another missed opportunity? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Is this the return to form fans have been